A pale moon hangs low over a frozen plain. It does not shine brightly. It glows with a tired gentleness, as if it has watched too many winters and learned to speak in softer light. The air is still. The cold is deep, but calm, not biting, not cruel, simply present, and the plain exhales. A slow breath of frost rises from the ground, a thin veil drifting across the surface like mist over sleeping water. In the distance, nothing moves. No tree sways, no bird calls, only the snow and the moon and silence gathering like incense. Then the snow parts, not in a dramatic break, but in a quiet revealing, as if the earth has lifted a curtain for one moment only to let it fall again. There, pressed into the surface, lies a footprint, impossible, vast, patient, pressed deep into the earth as if the land itself once yielded in reverence. It is not sharp-edged, it is not fresh, it is ancient, and yet it remains. It is said that some prints refuse to be erased, that some steps are so heavy with meaning that even snow cannot fully hide them. We kneel beside it, not with hurry, not with the hunger to solve, but with the slow attention one gives to sacred things. The footprint is a bowl in the earth, wide enough to hold shadow, wide enough to hold moonlight. Its edges are softened by time, but the depth is still there, a quiet testimony of weight, a mammoth's step, a giant's pause. In forgotten corners of the earth, the past is not only behind us. Sometimes it is beneath us, sleeping in layers of ice, sealed under permafrost like a story folded and tucked away. And sometimes the past rises, a bone revealed by wind, a tusk curved like a crescent moon beneath shallow soil, a single footprint uncovered in snow. This one print opens a door, not a door of wood or stone, but a door in the mind, because once you see it, you cannot help but imagine the being that made it, not as a monster, not as a spectacle, but as a presence, a keeper of warmth in a cold age. It is said that the mammoths moved like slow weather, that their herds crossed the world in patient lines, carving corridors through snow and ice and grassland. Their bodies were built for winter, fur layered like woven dusk, fat stored like hidden sunlight, breath rising in soft clouds that warmed the air for a moment before disappearing. In the mornings, when dawn arrived pale and hesitant, their steam would lift like quiet prayers, and the earth listened. These were not only animals, some believed they were earth-shapers, that their movement shaped the land the way rivers shape valleys, steadily, without force, by simply being themselves. Their feet pressed paths into frozen ground, their tusks swept snow aside, revealing buried grasses and plants not only for themselves, but for smaller creatures that followed in their wake. Where mammoths passed, the world opened. Where mammoths rested, the earth held warmth a little longer. And so, this footprint is not just a mark. It is a doorway into the mammoth paths, the slow corridors of movement that crossed continents, remembered now only by stone and ice. Imagine for a moment the ancient world, a wide tundra under star-marked skies. The wind moves gently through sparse grasses. Snow drifts across open ground like a soft oceanic tide. The horizon is wide, held open by emptiness and possibility. Then, from the distance, the herd appears. Dark forms moving through whiteness, their backs like low hills. Their steps are steady, unhurried, as if time bends around them. They follow routes older than memory, routes not drawn on scrolls, but etched into instinct, into tradition, into the deep knowing of bodies that have walked the same paths for generations. Some believe these routes were guided by stars. Northern tales speak of earth-shapers who followed constellations rather than fear. They moved beneath the same lights we see now, but those lights felt closer then, as if the sky itself leaned down to watch them pass. In those stories, mammoths are not merely beasts. They are guardians of balance, of cycles, of the slow turning between ice and thaw. Whispers tell us that the mammoths knew the land in ways humans never could. They knew where snow would be thinner, where wind would carve hollows, where water would still run beneath ice. They knew the scent of distant valleys, the taste of hidden grasses, the feel of coming weather in the air. They were perfectly shaped for their world, and that is where the contradiction begins to hum, soft as wind behind a hill. Beings perfectly shaped for survival, yet gone. How does that happen? How does a creature so vast, so enduring, so aligned with winter itself, vanish from the waking world? We do not answer quickly. This chapter does not hurry toward certainty. It drifts, because the truth is veiled, sealed beneath layers of time, the way the mammoths themselves were sealed beneath permafrost. Some believe the skies changed, not with one great storm, but with subtle shifts, winters that altered their rhythm, summers that grew uncertain, grasslands that tightened, forests that moved. A world turning quietly, rearranging its offerings. Others whisper of human shadows, not necessarily cruel shadows, not necessarily evil, but present. Firelight on the edge of the plains, new footsteps crossing old routes, hunger and survival moving alongside wonder. But we do not name these possibilities sharply. We let them linger like smoke, because there is something sacred in not knowing. It is said that the past is not a clean story. It is a chamber full of echoes, where multiple truths breathe side by side. And so we remain with the footprint, and we let the questions settle into it like falling snow. The imprint is deep enough to hold silence. As we look closer, we notice the texture within. Tiny grains of ice, a faint crust where melt and refreeze once happened. A delicate pattern where snowflakes gathered, then dissolved, then returned again. Time has touched this footprint many times, yet it endures. This is what makes it feel like a relic, not something lifted out of history, but something history has been moving around, returning to, circling, failing to erase. Nearby in the mind's eye, ivory glimmers. A tusk fragment half buried in frost, curved like a crescent moon under dust. Ivory that outlived the body it once guarded. Ivory that waited centuries in darkness, absorbing the cold, holding memory without voice. Presence and absence in the same object, just as the footprint holds presence and absence in the same depression. It is said that some things remain not to explain, but to remind. The footprint reminds us that a world once existed where giants walked slowly through snow. A world where breath rose in warm clouds at dawn. A world where the horizon was held open by massive silhouettes moving with patience. And now, standing here under the pale moon, we feel the distance between that world and ours. Not measured in years, measured in feeling. The cold air around us is quiet, but it is not the same cold they knew. The snow is still snow, but it does not carry the same weight of presence. The plain feels emptier. And yet, the footprint says, they were here. Some believe the earth keeps such marks as a form of reverence, that the ground, which once carried these enormous lives, holds their imprint like an altar holds a sacred bowl. Because what else can the earth do with such memory? It cannot speak, so it presses, it holds, it keeps the shape of what has passed. We step into the footprint, not physically, but in imagination. We stand inside its curved edges, as if inside a small crater of time. The walls rise around us like a soft stone ring. The bottom holds a darker shadow, colder, deeper, and in that shadow it is easy to imagine the mammoth pausing here. A moment of stillness in the long migration. Maybe it paused to listen, to the ice beneath its feet, to the wind above its head, to the distant calls of its herd. Maybe it paused as dawn came and the first pale light touched its fur, and its breath rose like prayer. Then it moved on, and the footprint remained. This is the haunting tenderness of it, a pause that outlasted the being who paused. We return again to the contradiction, perfectly adapted, yet gone. Perhaps that is the lesson hidden in the snow. That adaptation is not immortality. That endurance does not guarantee forever, that even the mightiest lives can slip through unseen gates. But what if they did not simply vanish? What if the disappearance is not a full erasure but a crossing? Some myths suggest that when a creature's time in the visible world ends, it steps beyond the veil, into a realm of shadow and starlight where time is different. In those stories, mammoths become part of the Earth's dreaming. They walk beneath the ground, moving through hidden chambers of ice. They keep the world balanced in silence, unseen but not gone. Whispers tell us the permafrost is not only frozen soil, but a sealed library. A place where the past is kept intact, not dead, but sleeping. And so, when we find a footprint like this, perhaps we are not finding a relic of extinction. Perhaps we are finding the edge of a doorway, a sign that the giant stepped somewhere we cannot follow while awake. The chapter slows further now, becoming softer, as if sleep itself is drawing close. The wind stirs lightly, brushing the surface of the plain. Snow begins to drift again, fine and quiet, like dust falling inside a forgotten temple. The first flakes touch the footprint's rim. They settle, they soften the edges. They begin the long work of hiding, not violently, gently. The snow does not erase in anger. It covers the way a blanket covers a sleeping body, and soon the footprint is less distinct. Its bowl fills slowly, grain by grain. Moonlight still catches it, but faintly now, diffused through the new layer of white. And in that fading, we feel the sacred uncertainty the chapter was always moving toward. We do not know why the mammoths vanished. We do not know what forces braided together into their disappearance. We do not know whether the final step was taken under a changing sky, or near human firelight, or beneath a winter that grew too long. We only know that the earth still holds their marks, and that the marks are being covered again. Perhaps it was never meant to be held in full clarity. Perhaps the past is allowed to surface only briefly, then return to its veil. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And tonight, under the pale moon, we listen not for answers, but for the feeling that remains, that the giants may not have vanished, only stepped beyond the veil of time. As snow drifts back into the footprint, smoothing its edges, the plain grows whole again, white, quiet, unbroken. But beneath that smoothness the earth still remembers, and as your own breath slows, as your mind softens into sleep, you may feel it too, a vast presence just beyond waking, a slow corridor of movement beneath the snow, and the gentle certainty that some footsteps do not end, they simply continue, where we cannot follow with open eyes. The valley reveals itself slowly, as if it has been waiting to be noticed, not with sound, not with movement, but with absence, a hollow in the earth, cupped gently between low, patient hills where sunlight hesitates and the wind forgets to speak. Here silence gathers like incense, drifting low and heavy, settling into every crease of stone and dust. It is said that some places do not echo because they are already listening. Beneath this silence, beneath layers of pale soil and time-worn grit, lie the remains of giants, not scattered, not broken by violence, but arranged with a quiet intention, as though the earth itself had been preparing a resting place long before the final breath was drawn. Massive ribs curve upward from the ground, forming arches that resemble forgotten temples. Skulls rest tilted toward the sky, their hollow chambers open to stars that no longer remember their names. Ivory fragments sleep beside stone, softened by centuries of dust. The bones do not feel abandoned, they feel settled. This is one of the valleys where the giants laid down. Across the ancient world, such places exist, valleys, basins, lowlands, where mammoths, mastodons, and thunder beasts gathered near the end of their long dominion. They arrived not alone, but together, drawn from distant plains, frozen corridors, and grasslands marked by moon and frost. They came slowly, deliberately, as if following a path known only to them. Whispers tell us that these were not accidents of geography, not random convergences of death, but sacred grounds, known in ways no map could hold. The elders of old stories speak carefully of such places. They say the animals felt the turning of the world before it was visible, that they sensed shifts beneath their feet, subtle changes in breath, in grass, in the way the stars leaned closer each night. It is said that when the rhythm of the earth began to falter, the giants listened, and when listening was no longer enough, they walked. Imagine them moving through twilight plains, enormous yet unhurried, each step heavy with memory. Their bodies carried the warmth of vanished summers, the patience of long winters. They traveled not in fear, but in recognition, following a pull deeper than hunger, older than instinct. Some believe the valleys called to them, that the land itself opened a gate, unseen, marked only by feeling, a place where endings could be held gently. As we move through the valley now, the air feels thicker, almost ceremonial. Dust lifts slowly with each imagined step, then settles again, as if unwilling to linger too long above the bones. The earth here seems to breathe differently, shallow, careful, reverent. In the shadowed chambers beneath the surface, ribs lie side by side, aligned like pillars. Skulls face inward, toward one another, suggesting communion rather than collapse. There is no chaos here, no frantic scattering, only order softened by time. And yet, beneath this calm, a contradiction hums. Were these valleys scenes of catastrophe, moments when fire, cold, or hunger arrived all at once, leaving no path of escape? Or were they sanctuaries, chosen places of farewell, where the giants laid themselves down as the world shifted beyond their knowing? The earth does not answer, it only holds. Stone warmed briefly by starlight seems to remember weight, the long pressure of bodies resting, the slow surrender of breath. Even now the ground bears impressions too subtle for the eye, but not for the spirit. Depressions where enormous forms once settled, hollows shaped by patience rather than collapse. Some believe the giants came here to listen one final time, to the deep pulse beneath stone, to the ancient hum of the planet that had carried them since the beginning. Others whisper that these valleys were thresholds, places where the visible world thinned, and another waited just beyond the veil. That the giants did not simply die here, but crossed, leaving their bones behind like garments folded with care. The skulls tell their own quiet stories. Half revealed by wind, their vast curves catch moonlight in soft arcs. Within them, chambers where breath once echoed now cradle silence, and yet when the night wind passes just right, it is said a low tone can be heard, not a sound, but a feeling, a resonance, as if memory itself were humming. We must move slowly here. Fast steps feel unwelcome, as though haste would disturb something still in progress. This valley is not finished. Across centuries, dust has come and gone, ice has crept closer, then retreated. Grass has claimed the edges, then yielded again, and still the bones remain, patient, enduring, untouched by urgency. The giants belonged to a time when endings were not sharp, when extinction, if it came, arrived like dusk, gradual, quiet, unavoidable. No single moment marked the last breath of their kind, only a long, shared understanding. It is said they felt it together, a collective knowing, passing from body to body like a low vibration through the ground. When one paused, others followed. When one turned toward the valley, the rest adjusted their path without question. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. As the exploration deepens, melancholy settles in, not violent, not desperate, but solemn. The sadness here is not of loss alone, but of completion, of something vast finishing its story exactly where it was meant to. The giants did not fight the silence, they entered it. Night falls fully now in the valley. The stars appear one by one, cautious at first, then generous. They look down upon the bones with distant familiarity, as if remembering an old agreement. Dust settles again, soft as breath. The valley cools. Silence deepens, not empty, but full. And in that stillness, it is easy to imagine that the bones are dreaming of open plains and endless grass, of rivers parted gently by immense bodies, of calves walking beneath shadowed bellies, safe and warm, of skies that never seemed too small. Perhaps the giants still walk in those dreams, slowly, without weight, moving through landscapes no longer bound by time, or perhaps they sleep without dream, content in their chosen ground. The earth does not tell us which is true, it only cradles them. As we step back from the valley, quietly, respectfully, the hills close in once more. The entrance narrows, the silence resumes its watch. Nothing asks to be solved here, nothing demands an answer. The valley remains what it has always been, a place where endings are held gently, where even giants are allowed to rest. And somewhere beneath the settling dust, beneath stone and starlight, the quiet suggestion lingers, that even the largest beings, who once shaped the world with every step, still choose where to sleep forever. The dusk arrives the way it always has, quietly without announcement, a slow dimming at the edge of the world, a soft veiling of color, as if the sky is drawing a thin curtain across its face. And there, in that tender hour between day and night, the horizon stretches wide and empty, wide and yet not complete, because even emptiness can feel crowded with what is missing. It is said that some landscapes remember, not with thoughts, not with words, but with a kind of silent shape that lingers in the air, like a scent after a candle has been blown out. And when you stand at dusk and look into the far distance, you may sense it, the outline of something enormous that once belonged there. Once, giants held the horizon, not as conquerors, not as monsters, but as living anchors, steadying the world simply by being part of it. Their presence was like a mountain's presence, unquestioned, slow, ancient. In forgotten corners of the earth, long before the world became narrow with fences and names, the land was open like a long breath. Grasslands rolled out beneath the sky like a soft ocean. Forests stood in wide, gentle intervals, leaving space for starlight to fall. Rivers wandered without hurry, tracing silver spirals through the plains. And through all of it, the giants moved. Some believe they were not separate from the land at all, that they were extensions of it, walking hills, breathing mountains, drifting shadows cast by earth itself. If you could have seen them at dusk, you might have mistaken them for the landscape shifting. A giant sloth, tall as a small tree, moving with an unspoken patience, its fur catching dust and light like a cloak, its claws slow and curved like ancient sickles, not for violence, but for gathering. It would reach upward, gently, as if offering its breath to leaves, and the branches would bend in quiet agreement. A massive grazer, broad-backed, heavy-footed, would walk along a river's edge, not chasing anything, not fleeing, just moving, and in that movement, shaping, pressing pathways into the soil that would later become trails for water, for wind, for smaller lives that followed. It is easy to forget this when we think of the past too quickly, but the world was not merely inhabited by these beings, it was arranged around them. Their weight wrote soft poems into the land. Their hunger trimmed forests into openness. Their migrations carried seeds in their fur, in their bellies, in the folds of their long journeys. Their resting places pressed shallow basins into earth that later held rain. They were architects without plans, gardeners without names, and the land in return gave them space. Whispers tell us that where giants walked, the horizon stayed wide, because the world remained in motion, not frantic motion, but slow, steady, living motion. A rhythm that allowed grasslands to breathe, forests to pause, rivers to wander. At night, the stars would hang above these open places like a celestial map. And beneath that star-marked ceiling, the giants would move like quiet constellations of flesh and breath. Some believe the earliest people who watched them did not see them as animals, not in the way we might now. They saw them as spirits wearing bodies, as sacred forms made visible, not separate from the world, but bound to it, like thunder bound to the sky. In cave shadows, in stories carried by firelight, the giants became symbols of balance, of endurance, of an older agreement between earth and life. And then, slowly, they faded, not in a single moment, not with a loud ending. Their disappearance was more like a song quieting at the edge of hearing, a long note that grows softer until you cannot tell when it stopped. It is said that the first sign was not absence, but a subtle change in rhythm. The plains began to feel different, as if the wind had fewer places to travel, as if the sky leaned a little closer, heavy with a new kind of silence. Some believe that when the giants began to vanish, the land itself shifted its posture. Forests closed, not with malice, simply with opportunity. Without the steady trimming of great mouths, trees grew closer together. Brush thickened. Shadows gathered where sunlight once wandered freely. The grasslands, once open like a long exhale, began to tighten. The horizon, once held wide by enormous moving bodies, started to feel narrower, as if the world were folding inward. Rivers changed too, quietly, almost invisibly. Where heavy feet once pressed channels and kept paths open, water found new routes. Marshes formed where plains once stood dry. Certain wildflowers stopped appearing in places they once loved. And yet, there is no accusation in this story, no harsh pointing of blame. The chapter does not accuse or explain. It listens, because the truth, like so many ancient truths, is veiled. Some say the climate turned, that the world warmed or cooled in ways the giants could not follow. Some whisper of human shadows, of spears, of fire, of hunting carried out not with cruelty, but with need. Some believe it was a weaving of many small endings into one great fading. But the land holds its secrets the way stone holds heat, slowly and without confession. What we do know is this: a world without giants is not the same world. And if you stand at dusk in a wide place where the sky opens fully, you may feel it. The horizon still stretches, yes, but it does not feel balanced. It feels like a great frame left holding air where a painting once hung. It is said that absence has a shape, and here the shape is enormous. Beneath the silence, memory stirs. Imagine a time when a single giant could change the feeling of a whole valley. When the shadow of a massive body passing over grass was like night briefly visiting day. When herds moved across the plains like slow storms, leaving behind not destruction, but renewal. Pressed earth ready for rain, scattered seeds ready for spring. Some believe the giants were part of a sacred cycle we no longer fully understand. A cycle of disturbance and regrowth, of opening and closing, of breath and return. In that older world, the giants were the deep drumbeat, slow, steady, grounding. And when the drumbeat stopped, the music of the land changed. Perhaps this is why so many myths speak of them with reverence, why some traditions describe a time when the world was larger, looser, more generous, and then a time when it tightened. In certain stories, the giants did not die. They withdrew. They stepped beyond a gate marked by the moon, into a place where human eyes could not follow, leaving behind only echoes, bones in the earth, images in stone, dreams in the sleeping mind. And what is an echo, really, but a reminder that something once filled the air? When you listen closely at night, when the wind crosses a wide plain, you may hear a low, almost imagined resonance. Not a sound exactly, more like a feeling in the chest, a sense that the land is calling out in a language too old for our waking thoughts. It is said that some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. As night settles fully, the last color drains from the sky. Stars appear, patient, distant, unchanged. And the horizon, now a dark line against the heavens, feels even emptier. Yet still, it holds. It holds the memory of enormous shapes that once stood there, steadying the world simply by belonging to it. It holds the quiet truth that landscapes are not only made of rock and soil, but of relationships, of lives that shaped them and absences that reshaped them again. And so we stand at the edge of the world, not searching for an answer, but for a feeling. We let the wind pass through tall grass like a slow hand. We let the stars mark the sky like sacred script. We let the silence deepen, not as emptiness, but as a chamber, a vast, listening chamber where the past still breathes. Perhaps the giants are not entirely gone. Perhaps they remain as a subtle widening of the mind when we imagine them, as a tenderness in the way we look at open land, as a dream of a world that once felt held, balanced and wide. And as the night grows softer, as sleep approaches like a gentle tide, we leave the horizon as it is, open, quiet, unanswered. Because some stories were never meant to end sharply. Some truths were never meant to be pinned down like insects beneath glass. They are meant to drift, to echo, to remain veiled. And in that veil, the giants still stand, just beyond the reach of waking sight, holding the horizon in the hush of our dreams. It begins with a quiet glimmer, the smallest betrayal of darkness. A thin curve of ivory catches the moon, just for a moment, beneath shallow soil, not fully revealed, not fully hidden, as if the earth itself has lifted a corner of its veil, only to let it fall again. In the pale hush of night, the ground looks ordinary, a sleeping surface of dust and stone. But beneath it, something ancient waits. It is said that certain objects do not belong to time the way we do. They pass through centuries without hurrying, without forgetting. They listen, they endure. And among these patient witnesses, there are tusks, ivory crescents, carved not by human hands, but by life itself, shaped slowly, year after year, by breath and bone and seasons. Once they curved outward from the faces of giants, guarding mouths that tore through frost-dry grass and low branches. Once they glowed faintly in dawn light, stained with mud, warmed by sunlight, etched by wind. Now they lie beneath the world, buried, waiting, in forgotten corners of the earth, in frozen plains, in riverbanks, in valleys where dust gathers like prayer. There are places where ivory sleeps, not in museums, not in bright rooms of glass and labels, but in the deep chambers where silence is thick and old. If you were to kneel there at night, when the moon is high and the wind is gentle, you might feel the presence of what lies below, not as a thought, but as a pressure, a subtle heaviness, as though the ground is holding a secret too large to speak aloud. Whispers tell us that ivory remembers, not with memory like ours, not with images and names, but with something more elemental, a record of weight, of movement, of the slow rhythm of living bodies passing through the world. And so we begin our journey inward, following that moonlit curve where it disappears into soil. We move slowly, because this is not excavation, this is not conquest. This is a kind of ceremony. Each layer of earth removed is like a breath taken carefully. Each grain of dust lifted away is like an old word spoken softly, so as not to wake the sleeping past. Beneath the surface, the air changes, cooler, still, as if the world above has been left behind and we have entered a quieter age. The ivory emerges gradually, a crescent, a pale arc, like the rim of a moon rising from darkness. It is so smooth in places, as though time has polished it with endless patience, and in other places it is rough, scarred, marked by the long story of being buried. Tiny cracks where the earth has pressed too closely, stains from minerals that seeped in like slow ink. Here, in this half-revealed shape, a contradiction begins to hum, gentle, distant, like bells heard far away across a sleeping valley. How can something endure so long? When the being that carried it is gone, the tusk remains. The guardian does not. It is one of the oldest heartbreaks of the earth, objects outlasting the lives that gave them meaning, and yet The tusk is not meaningless. Some believe tusks were sacred long before humans ever called them sacred. That even among the giants, ivory was more than a tool. It was a symbol of cycles, of endurance, of the slow turning of seasons. A tusk grows in spirals, not in sudden leaps, but in gradual arcs. A living curve that records time the way rings record years in a tree. If you could read it, truly read it, you might find the story of drought and abundance, of harsh winters and gentle springs. You might find echoes of migration routes traced across continents. You might find the memory of ancient grasses now vanished, the taste of forests that no longer stand. But the earth rarely gives its records freely. Most tusks remain buried where they fell. Some lie beneath permafrost, sealed in cold chambers where time barely moves. Others rest in riverbanks, where water slowly unearths them, then hides them again. Some sleep beneath dunes, where sand drifts like a slow oceanic tide, covering and uncovering the past in endless quiet waves. Marked by the moon, these places feel like thresholds, spaces where the visible world thins and the hidden world breathes close. In ancient tales, ivory often appears as a sign, a curved gate, a crescent key. Some legends speak of tusks as moonbones, pieces of the celestial realm fallen to earth. Others whisper that ivory carries a spirit, that it is a vessel for something that cannot completely die. It is said that when the giants still walked, their tusks caught starlight like polished stone. They moved beneath star-marked skies, and the ivory curves seemed to mirror the heavens above. Crescent answering crescent, earth reflecting sky. Perhaps that is why, even now, when a tusk is found half buried beneath soil, it feels like a message. Not fully readable, but unmistakably meant. And still, we must not hurry to translate it, because the deeper we go, the more the mystery widens. We follow the tusk into its resting place, and we begin to notice what surrounds it. The soil here is layered like pages, darker bands, lighter bands, each one a chapter of settling dust. Sometimes there are fragments of bone nearby, a jaw, a tooth, a rib worn smooth by centuries. Sometimes there is nothing else at all, only the tusk, alone in its chamber. This loneliness is another quiet contradiction. Why do some tusks remain when everything else is gone? Some believe the tusks were taken by scavengers, by water, by time. Some believe humans carried pieces away, not always for greed, but for ritual, for meaning, for survival, for the urge to hold the past in the palm. But in the tone of this chapter, we do not accuse. We do not sharpen the mystery into a weapon. We simply listen, because the tusk itself does not speak of blame. It speaks of endurance. It is strange to touch something that once grew from a living face, strange to feel its cool weight and know it was once warmed by blood and breath, strange to see its curve and realize that it was shaped by years, by seasons, by the slow, unbroken continuance of life. And then, one day, the continuance stopped. The guardian fell silent. The body returned to earth. But the tusk remained, holding its crescent shape like a question. Beneath the silence, you may begin to sense that ivory is not just a leftover. It is a threshold object, a boundary between presence and absence, between the living world and the buried one. In the dim chamber of soil, the tusk seems to glow faintly, not with light, but with significance, like a relic in a temple no longer visited. And the air around it feels ceremonial, as if this is not merely a remnant, but an offering. Some believe the giants carried their tusks as symbols of time itself, that the curve was not accidental, it was a mirror of the world's turning, a crescent shape, always returning, always changing. And in that sense, the tusk becomes a quiet reminder. Everything that lives is shaped by cycles, growth and wear, abundance and famine, warmth and ice, arrival and disappearance. Perhaps the tusks remain because the earth wanted to keep at least one line of the story unbroken, one curve intact, one crescent to hint at the whole. As we sit with this thought, the night above continues. The moon drifts slowly across the sky, indifferent and gentle, and beneath it the tusk rests, half revealed, half held. Dust clings to its surface like a soft veil, and in that dust you can almost imagine the invisible hands of time still moving, not to erase, but to soften. In the distance, beyond this imagined burial site, there are other chambers, other tusks, other crescents sleeping in their own darkness, a scattered constellation beneath the ground. And maybe that is the true cathedral of the giants now, not a structure of stone, but a hidden network of ivory and bone resting quietly beneath our feet, a sacred archive sealed by earth. If we listen long enough, we might feel the echo of what those tusks once guarded, the slow breathing of enormous beings, the rhythm of hooves or padded feet, the quiet weight of a world that held them. But we do not need to see it clearly. This chapter is not about solving, it is about sinking into the mystery the way a candle sinks into wax as it burns, leaving behind softness rather than certainty. And so, as our journey inward reaches its gentle end, we allow the tusk to remain as it is, half buried, half seen. We do not pull it entirely into the light, because some truths lose their sacredness when they are fully exposed. Some knowledge is meant to stay veiled, to keep its power in quiet incompletion. Perhaps it was never meant to be found completely. Perhaps the earth lifted the veil only for a moment, so we could remember that the past is still here, still breathing softly beneath the surface. And now, as sleep approaches like a slow oceanic tide, we step back. We let the dust settle again. We let the moon continue its patient drift. We let the tusk remain in its chamber, curved like a crescent prayer, holding its silence. Because some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some relics, like ivory beneath the moon, are not answers. They are invitations. A low fire flickers against the night. Its flame is small, careful, almost humble, as if it knows it does not wish to be seen from far away. Smoke lifts in a slow spiral, curling upward into the waiting starlight, where it thins and disappears. It is said that fire remembers every hand that has ever fed it, every branch placed gently upon it, every breath that leaned close for warmth. Here, in this forgotten clearing, the fire does not roar. It murmurs. It speaks in soft tongues of ember and ash, and somewhere beyond the edge of its glow, the darkness holds another presence, vast, unhurried, watching without eyes. In forgotten corners of the earth, there was a time when firelight and giant shadow shared the same ground, not in battle, not in panic, but in proximity. The world then was wide enough for both. Human footsteps pressed lightly into the soil, careful and tentative. Giant tracks lay deeper, broader, holding rain and moonlight like shallow bowls. Between them, grass bent and rose again. Nothing hurried to choose sides. Whispers tell us that the first fires were not signals of dominance, but of belonging. Small suns kindled on cold nights, gathering points where stories and breath braided together, where fear softened into warmth, and beyond those circles of light the giants moved. Sometimes they paused at the edge of firelight, their massive forms suggested only by shifting silhouettes. A curved back passing behind trees, a slow limb lifting, then settling, a breath that stirred leaves without sound. It is said the giants did not fear fire at first. They recognized it as something young, restless, a force that flickered rather than endured. And humans, in turn, did not always fear the giants. They watched them the way one watches weather, with respect, with caution, with awe. This chapter is not about conflict, it is about closeness, about a long age when two kinds of beings learned how to share the same night. We walk slowly now through landscapes where embers once glowed beside ancient paths, plains where mammoths passed near camps without alarm, riverbanks where ash mingled with hoof-marked mud, forests where fire cleared undergrowth, and giants followed, drawn to the new green that always returns after flame. Beneath the silence, there is a rhythm, a subtle call and response between fire and footstep, between spark and shadow. Some believe there were understandings made in those early nights, not spoken agreements, but sensed boundaries. Fire stayed low, giants stayed distant. Both listened. In certain myths, passed down like half-forgotten dreams, the giants are said to have watched humans learn how to coax flame from stone, learn how to carry it without being consumed, learn how to shape night into something warmer. And humans watched the giants in return, learned their paths, their seasons, their silences. These stories do not paint a world of constant pursuit. They paint a world of negotiation, a shared landscape marked by quiet decisions, when to approach, when to retreat, when to wait. The fire flickers. The night listens. Contradiction lives here, breathing softly, because while fire brought warmth, it also brought change. It altered grasslands, opened forests, invited new growth, and with it, new patterns of movement. The giants followed those changes as they always had. They moved toward abundance, toward renewal. They trusted the land's rhythm, and yet the rhythm was changing. It is said that as fires multiplied, small at first, then more frequent, the night began to glow in new ways, not brighter, just different. The giants noticed, not with alarm, but with attention. Some myths speak of bargains made then, not contracts, but balances. Fire for passage, fire for distance, fire for respect. Beings too large to fear, yet too powerful to ignore. Humans did not yet see themselves as masters. They saw themselves as guests who had learned a powerful language and were still careful with it. But language spreads. Fire travels. As nights warmed and territories shifted, the old closeness grew more complicated. Not immediately, not violently, just gradually. Fire cleared land more often now. Paths widened, encampments lingered longer in one place, and the giants, patient as they were, began to find their routes subtly altered. The chapter does not accuse, it does not sharpen this moment into a blade. It simply observes. Because disappearance rarely arrives as a single act. It arrives as a series of small adjustments that no one names at the time. The giants continued to walk, humans continued to tend their fires, and the overlap, once gentle, became heavier with meaning. Some believe that in those nights, when firelight trembled against enormous forms, both sides sensed an ending approaching without knowing its shape. The giants stood at the edge of light longer now, still calm, still vast, but listening more deeply. Humans watched them too, not with hatred, but with uncertainty. The fire crackles softly, smoke rises, stars remain indifferent. It is easy in later ages to tell this story with sharp edges, to choose heroes and villains, to name causes and consequences as if the past were simple, but beneath the silence, the truth is softer and more difficult. Coexistence and disappearance breathed side by side. The giants did not vanish the moment fire appeared. They lived alongside it for generations. They adapted, they endured, and humans did not awaken one morning intent on erasure. They followed warmth, they followed survival, they followed the quiet promise of flame. Some believe the giants recognized this, that they understood the fire was not evil, only young, and youth, like flame, spreads quickly when given space. In certain ancient carvings, now worn almost smooth, enormous animals stand near small figures holding torches, not fleeing, not attacking, simply sharing the same frame, as if to say, we were here together. But time, like fire, reshapes everything it touches. As centuries passed, climates shifted, grasslands narrowed, cold and warmth traded places unpredictably, and the giants, already carrying the weight of change, found fewer open nights. The fires followed them, not always as hunters' flames, sometimes as signal fires, sometimes as clearing fires. sometimes as warmth carried forward into new territories. And slowly, without ceremony, the distance between fire and giant widened, not by intention, but by outcome. The giants retreated into quieter spaces, colder spaces, places where flame was rarer. And then, even those places grew silent. We return now to the opening image, the low fire flickering against night. Its glow feels smaller somehow, more alone. There are no massive shadows passing beyond it now, no deep footfalls vibrating through the ground. Just the fire, the stars, the hush. The final reflection does not name what was lost. It does not count bones or tally causes. It simply watches. The fire burns down slowly, ember by ember. Ash gathers like pale dust, soft, harmless, weightless. Darkness moves closer, reclaiming the space the flame once held. And in that darkness, the question remains, unspoken, unanswered. What does a world lose when its largest beings disappear, not just in body, but in presence? Perhaps the giants were never meant to be remembered as victims or foes. Perhaps they were witnesses to a turning point the world itself had been moving toward. Perhaps the fire was not a weapon, but a mirror, reflecting humanity's growing closeness to power. Or perhaps it was never meant to be understood fully. As the last ember fades, the smoke thins into the stars once more. Night settles completely, and the land holds its breath. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some losses remain unnamed, not because they are forgotten, but because they are too vast for language. The fire is gone now, but somewhere, in the deep memory of the earth, its warmth still lingers, beside the fading footsteps of giants who once walked calmly through its glow, and vanished, without accusation, into the dark. It begins with a stone that does not look sacred, a flat slab resting in open air, half sunken into the soil, weathered by seasons that arrived and left without asking permission. There are no carvings on its face, no letters, no crown of flowers. And yet, when the moon is low and the world grows quiet enough, you can see it. Shallow depressions, soft dents in the stone, like the faintest fingerprints of something enormous. Not sharp marks, not wounds, just gentle hollows, worn into the surface as if the earth once yielded and never fully forgot. It is said that some places keep records without ink. That stone can be a scroll, that the land itself can remember, even when all voices have fallen silent. So we kneel beside this ordinary-looking slab, and we let our breath slow. We let the night settle. We listen, not with our ears, but with whatever part of us still knows how to hear the old world. Beneath the silence, the stone seems to hold a story, not loudly, not clearly, but with patience, in forgotten corners of the earth, in plains that stretch like oceanic grass, in valleys cupped by ancient hills, in riverlands where mist curls at dawn. There are landscapes shaped by bodies that no longer walk there. Trails worn deep, not by wheels, not by tools, but by weight. A long, steady weight repeated across generations. Paths that feel too wide for deer, too deep for ordinary herds. It is said that these are the old roads of giants, not roads built by hands but by presence, by movement so consistent that the earth adjusted itself around it, like clay around a slow turning wheel. And here, on this stone, the memory is concentrated, a single page from a book written by footsteps. Some believe the giants rested here, not dramatically, not as if collapsing, but as one rests in a familiar place, returning again and again. A flat stone warmed by sun, cooled by night, steady beneath the body's long breathing. Perhaps a mammoth paused here, its bulk settling with a sigh that never reached human ears. Perhaps a massive grazer leaned its weight against the stone's edge, pressing down as the wind moved through its fur. Perhaps a herd gathered nearby, and this stone became a quiet anchor, a center point in the slow map of their wandering lives. The atmosphere around it is still, attentive. The air feels like it is waiting for something that has already happened. And the stone, it is not merely stone, it is a listener, a keeper of pressure and time. When you touch it, your fingers meet cold, rough surface, but beneath that surface there is a softness that cannot be felt directly. The softness of memory held without voice. The mystery unfolds gently, like a veil lifting in slow motion. Can the land remember what walked upon it? We often think of memory as something that lives only in minds. But the earth has its own way of recording. Rain remembers where rivers used to run, leaving faint channels etched into the dust. Wind remembers old paths through grass, bending stalks in familiar directions. And stone remembers weight. It does not remember names. It does not remember faces, but it remembers the shape of presence. In ancient places, there are valleys shaped by passage, wide corridors between hills where the ground is pressed flatter, smoother, almost polished by centuries of movement. There are low ridges worn down, as if something heavy brushed against them again and again, slowly sanding the world into new contours. There are watering holes with edges widened, softened, deepened, not by erosion alone, but by countless bodies arriving and leaving, their thirst written into the land like a sacred chant repeated until the earth itself joins in. The giants were not simply creatures in the landscape. They were forces that rearranged it. Their bodies carried a kind of gravitational calm. Their steps were slow earthquakes, gentle but certain. Their migrations were long breaths that stretched across continents. And where they walked, the world changed its shape to accommodate them. Sometimes, far from any visible ruin, you can find these subtle traces, like ghost architecture. A shallow trench through a meadow, too old to belong to any modern path. A line of flattened ground crossing a ridge, aligned not with human convenience, but with ancient necessity. Water, shelter, open space, the quiet logic of survival. Whispers tell us that in some places you can follow these trails for miles. They lead to river crossings that feel chosen, to valleys that feel like sanctuaries, to passes between mountains that seem carved by patience rather than blade. It is as if the giants carried an invisible compass, and the land, trusting their wisdom, allowed them to write the map. But now the bodies are gone, the weight has lifted, and still the impressions remain. This is where the contradiction hums, soft, distant, persistent. How can something so alive vanish while the ground continues to speak of it? The stone does not answer directly. It only holds its shallow depressions, like cupped hands that once held a great burden and have not forgotten the feel of it. Some believe the earth holds grief in this way, not as sadness like ours, but as a lingering imprint, a physical reminder that something once belonged here and no longer does. Others believe it is simply physics, pressure, time, but even if it is only physics, there is something sacred in that simplicity, because it means the world is not easily erased. That existence leaves a mark, that being alive, even briefly, even long ago, presses into reality in a way that cannot be fully undone. We move from the stone outward now, letting its silence guide us into wider landscapes. Imagine standing on a plain at dusk where tall grass waves like an oceanic surface beneath a star-marked sky. The horizon feels too open, too quiet, and yet, beneath your feet, the earth is not smooth. There are shallow grooves, not random, not chaotic. Long lines running parallel, curving gently, converging toward distant water. Old trails, the paths of bodies that moved in herds, that traveled with patience. The land is like a crumbled manuscript, but readable if you slow down enough. The wind passes through grass, like a breath through a chamber, and in that chamber the past echoes faintly. In some places you might find stones like this one, resting beside these old trails, marked by shallow dents where weight once settled. Rest stones, pause stones, witness stones, they are not monuments in the human sense. No one raised them, No one named them, and yet they have become monuments anyway, because they have endured. It is said that endurance is a kind of holiness. The giants, too, were endurance made visible. Their lives stretched across long seasons. Their bodies were built for patience. And when they disappeared, they left behind not only bones and ivory, but this subtle reshaping, the land's memory of their presence. We must be careful here in how we imagine the ending. This chapter is not about blame, not about a single cause. It is about what remains after the moving stops. The stone's depressions do not tell us why the giants vanished. They only tell us that they were here, and they were heavy with life. Some believe the world changed around them, ice retreating, forests closing, grasslands tightening like a fist. Some believe humans followed their paths too closely, carrying fire and hunger and new kinds of pressure into the old rhythm. But the stone does not choose a story. It holds all possibilities in silence, because silence is sometimes the only honest ending. As night deepens, the stone cools, the moon lifts higher, and the shallow dents grow darker with shadow, more visible, like small bowls of night. You can imagine rain pooling there someday, filling those depressions with water that reflects the sky, a tiny mirror held in stone. And in that mirror, perhaps, the giants might appear again, not as bodies, but as suggestion. A curve of shadow crossing the reflected moon, a sense of movement in the stillness. It is said that the past returns in small ways when we stop demanding it return loudly. And so we return to the stone one final time. We sit beside it as if beside an elder who does not speak, but teaches anyway. We let our breathing slow until it matches the quiet of the night. We let our thoughts soften like dust settling after wind. The stone remains, flat, ordinary, unadorned. And yet, it holds something immeasurable, a record of weight, a record of presence, a record of a world that once moved differently. The final reflection rests here, in the stone's silence, because some memories do not live in words. They live in pressure, in shape, in the gentle hollows left behind when something immense rises and walks away. Perhaps the land remembers more than we know. Perhaps it holds every footstep, every pause, every resting breath in hidden chambers beneath the surface. Or perhaps it remembers only fragments, enough to remind us, but not enough to explain. Either way, the stone asks nothing of us. It does not demand understanding, it only offers witness. And as sleep approaches, as the world grows softer around the edges, we allow that to be enough. Marked by the moon, the stone remains, holding memory without voice, a quiet altar to the giants who once pressed the earth and vanished, leaving their weight behind as an echo. The cold does not arrive like an enemy. It does not crash through the sky with thunder. It does not announce itself with sharp wind or sudden storms. It comes the way a shadow comes across a room when a candle grows tired, quietly, gradually, almost politely. It is said that the most powerful changes are the ones we do not hear. In the opening scene, the land is still, a wide plain under a pale, star-marked sky. The grass stands stiff and silvered, as if it has been holding its breath. A shallow pool near the center of the field reflects the moon in a trembling circle. And then, without warning, without sound, the surface of the water begins to tighten. A thin skin forms, not thick ice, not a dramatic freeze, just a fragile veil. Frost spreads outward in a slow spiral, delicate as lace, drawing quiet patterns across stone and reed and earth. The air cools by a single degree, then another, as if the world has decided to exhale less warmth. No one hears it happen, but the body feels it. Beneath the silence, the cold is entering the story. In forgotten corners of the earth, long ago, the climate changed not as a single event, but as a slow turning, a subtle shifting of the sky's mood, a lengthening of winter shadows, a shortening of gentle seasons, not storms, but small losses, a day that does not fully warm, A spring that comes late, uncertain, pale. A summer that feels thinner, as if sunlight has become a weaker medicine. And the giants, they noticed, not with panic, not with noise. They noticed the way ancient beings notice anything, by adjusting. It is said that the first sign was in their breath, how it rose thicker into the air, lingering longer like prayer that refused to fade. The second sign was in the ground, how it hardened sooner at night, resisting the soft press of heavy feet. And then, slowly, the world began to feel more brittle. The giants adapted. They were made for endurance. Some wore coats thick as woven dusk, hair layered like warmth upon warmth. Others carried fat beneath their skin like stored sunlight, saved for the months when the land offered less. They moved differently now. Roots changed. Timing shifted. They followed water with greater devotion, followed grass with deeper attention. They did not fight the cold. They became more intimate with it. And there is something strangely sacred in that resilience. To endure a world that cools around you, not with anger but with patience. To continue walking when the wind begins to carry sharper edges. To keep moving beneath a sky that seems to pale day by day. It is said that the giants were not simply surviving, they were listening. They listened to the language of ice forming in shallow places. They listened to the way trees creaked at night under frost. They listened to the long hush that settles when snow falls in thick sheets, muffling the world until even footsteps sound like dreams. In this chapter, we do not rush. We move slowly through the cooling world, like someone walking deeper into a temple whose air grows colder with each step. We imagine an ancient morning. The sky is grey-blue, the color of stone dust. A low sun lifts briefly, offering a weak gold that does not fully reach the ground. Across the plain, a herd moves, massive shapes wrapped in fur, their bodies steaming softly as they walk. Their feet press into frost-hardened earth. They leave tracks that hold shadow. A young one stays close to an elder, as if warmth can be inherited through proximity. The herd moves not in fear, but in quiet purpose. Some believe these animals carried an inner map, a memory of warmer places, of valleys that held grass longer, of rivers that did not freeze too early. A star-marked route written not on parchment, but in instinct and tradition. And still, even with all their knowing, the cold continues to settle, not with cruelty, with inevitability. Day by day, the land loses a little softness. The grasses become shorter, stiffer, less nourishing. The water becomes harder to reach. The snow stays longer in places where it once melted quickly, like a guest who has forgotten to leave. And the giants endure. They lower their heads, sweep aside snow with tusk and breath. They dig for hidden plants, for buried sweetness, for whatever the earth still holds. They break through crusted drifts, making paths that smaller creatures follow later, grateful for the wide corridors carved by immense persistence. In this way, the giants still shape the world, even as the world shapes them. And then, somewhere inside this slow unfolding, the contradiction begins to hum. Creatures built for cold, undone by it. It is a strange thought, tender and unsettling. We imagine them as perfectly adapted, as if nature would never betray its own design. But the cold is not a stable thing. It changes too. It deepens. It shifts its patterns. Sometimes the cold comes not as steady winter, but as unpredictable turning. Freeze, thaw, freeze again. A hard crust over snow that breaks wrong underfoot. Ice that seals plants too tightly beneath it. Storms that arrive out of season, not dramatic in the story, but exhausting in the body. The giants are resilient, yes, but resilience is not invincibility. And the chapter holds this truth gently, like a fragile bowl that must not be dropped. Some believe the cold did not destroy them directly. It simply narrowed their options. It shrank the spaces where they could feed. It shifted the timing of growth. It changed migration routes, making old paths less reliable. And in that narrowing, other pressures grew. Predators followed hunger. Humans followed herds. Competition tightened like a rope in silence, but the chapter does not turn sharp here. It does not point fingers. It simply observes how small changes can braid together into endings. Beneath the silence, the cold becomes not just weather, but atmosphere, a slow veil drawing across an entire age. In some ancient stories, the cold is described as a spirit that walks without feet, a presence that enters through cracks and settles in bones, a quiet force that does not hate but does not soften either. Whispers tell us that elders once spoke of winters that grew longer, of summers that grew weak, of ice that crept forward like a slow tide. And in those stories, the giants are not portrayed as failures. They are portrayed as dignified beings, facing a world that is changing beyond their control. There is honor in that, a kind of sacred melancholy. We move forward in time, still slow, still quiet. Years pass like snowflakes, individually soft, collectively transformative. The herd grows smaller, not all at once, not noticed in a single season, but gradually the horizon holds fewer massive silhouettes. A river crossing that once echoed with many footsteps becomes quieter. A valley that once held the warmth of bodies resting together feels empty, wind moving through it like a lonely song. And the land adjusts. Forests begin to shift, grasslands tighten. The great open spaces feel less held. The giants continue, but their story is thinning. It is said that extinction does not always happen with a final dramatic moment. Sometimes it happens like this, like a candle burning lower, lower, until the room is dark and you cannot say exactly when the flame disappeared. And now, as the chapter deepens toward its ending, we step into the cold itself. Not the cold of danger, the cold of quiet, the cold of stillness after movement. Night falls over a pale landscape. The sky is clear, and the stars shine with a hard clarity, as if the air has been scrubbed clean. Snow reflects moonlight like powdered stone. In this world, every sound is softened. Even thought feels slower. We imagine the last of the giants moving through this night, not as a tragedy, but as a fading presence. Their breath rises, white and gentle, then dissolves into the darkness. Their footsteps press into snow, leaving deep prints that will fill by morning. They do not know they are the last. They only know the cold, the hunger, the long path ahead. And perhaps that is the most tender part of the story. The world does not announce endings to those living inside them. The cold continues. It does not celebrate. It does not mourn. It simply is. And now the final reflection leaves us here, inside the cold itself, inside a quiet, unresolved hush. The air is thin and still. The moon is pale. The land is asleep beneath its white cover. Perhaps the giants vanished because the world turned against them. Perhaps they stepped through a veiled gate into a place we cannot name. Perhaps the cold was only one thread in a larger tapestry of change. We do not know. And maybe we are not meant to know. Perhaps it was never meant to be explained with certainty. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And tonight, as your own breath slows, as sleep approaches like a soft drift of snow, we allow the cold to remain what it is, a silent witness, a sacred veil, a chamber of stillness where the ancient world fades, not with sound, but with quiet, patient frost. The wind arrives first, not as a storm, not as a rush, but as a slow visitor moving across a forgotten place. It glides over pale ground where grass no longer grows tall, where the earth looks rubbed smooth by time. And then it finds them, exposed ribs rising from the soil like broken arches of an ancient hall. The wind threads itself through those curved bones, and the bones answer. A low, hollow tone rises into the air, so soft it could be mistaken for imagination. Not music in the way we name music, not a melody with a beginning and end, more like a vibration, a murmuring resonance, a sound that feels older than language. It is said that the earth keeps its own instruments, and here, in this quiet chamber of dust and bone, the past is playing itself without hands. In forgotten corners of the earth, there are places where giants once fell, and time did not fully cover them. A rib cage, half revealed by wind, a spine turning pale under sun and moon, a skull like a crumbled dome open to starlight. These bones are not only remains, they are vessels. Beneath the silence, they hold echoes, not just echoes of a moment, but echoes of a life, of breath moving through enormous lungs, of footsteps pressing into soft ground, of the slow shifting of bodies so large the land itself adjusted around them. And when the wind passes through them now, it is as if it awakens something sleeping inside. A faint song. We approach gently, as if stepping into a temple whose walls are made of memory. The air around the bones feels different, cooler, thicker, attentive. Dust clings to everything like a veil, and the light is soft, as though the sky does not wish to disturb what remains. It is said that bones are the last architecture of the body. When flesh fades, bone continues, holding shape when everything else has surrendered. But what if bone holds more than shape? Some believe bones hold sound, not recorded like ink on a scroll, not preserved like words carved into stone, but held in the quiet way a room can hold a voice long after the speaker leaves. Held in the way a bell seems to remember being struck. Whispers tell us that if you enter old places with enough stillness, you can hear what is not being said. And here, among the ribs of a giant, the wind becomes a storyteller. It moves through the curved chambers, and the hollow tone deepens, widening into something that feels almost ceremonial. The bones, arranged by accident or fate, become a kind of harp made by time. Each rib catches the air differently. Each gap becomes a mouth for sound, and together they produce a low chant that rises and falls like breath. It is easy to imagine the giants in this sound, to imagine them walking beneath star-marked skies, their bodies moving like hills, to imagine the soft thunder of their steps across plains, to imagine their breath, warm, heavy, visible in cold air like a prayer released. And perhaps those sounds never fully left. Perhaps they sank into the land. Perhaps they seeped into bone. In ancient stories, animals are often said to carry songs inside them. Not songs they sing with voices, but songs they carry in their movement. The song of migration, the song of feeding, the song of living in balance with a vast world. Some believe the giants had such songs, deep rhythms that traveled with them like invisible companions, a pattern in the way they moved together, a resonance in the way they shaped the land, a quiet harmony between their bodies and the earth beneath them. And now, what remains is not the living song, but its echo. The wind does not know what it is playing. It simply moves. And yet, the sound that rises from these ribs feels intentional, as if the world is remembering on purpose. We sit with this thought, and the chapter deepens. Because there is mystery here, and contradiction too. If bones hold echoes, why do we hear them only sometimes? Why do some places seem to sing, while others remain silent no matter how the wind passes? Perhaps it is not only the bones. Perhaps it is the listener. It is said that some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Maybe the song has always been here, buried beneath the ordinary noise of the waking world. And only in the quiet hours, only when night softens everything, do we become sensitive enough to hear it. We imagine the people who might have heard these sounds long ago. Early travelers crossing a wide plain, a small group moving under moonlight, carrying embers in a clay bowl, their steps careful. They come upon a ribcage rising from the earth like a gate. The wind passes through it. The sound rises. They pause, not from fear, but from recognition. In their world, everything had spirit, everything had voice. They might have believed the giant was still speaking, still singing through the bones, still present in a form that could not be seen. They might have knelt, touched the pale curve, whispered to it as one whispers at an altar. They might have offered smoke, or a handful of dust, or simply their quiet attention, because attention, too, is a kind of offering. In this chapter, we do not force certainty. We do not name explanations harshly. We let the possibility remain veiled. That bones can be instruments, that wind can be a choir, that sound can outlive the body. We listen again. The wind changes direction slightly, and the tone shifts. A deeper note, then a thinner one. It becomes less like a single voice and more like a gathering, as if the whole ribcage is speaking in layered murmurs. The sound moves across the ground, barely audible, and disappears into open air like breath dissolving. And in that moment, the atmosphere becomes dreamlike, because the sound does something subtle to the mind. It widens it. It makes the world feel larger, older, more sacred. It is as if the bones have opened a chamber inside us, a hollow space where echo can live. We begin to sense that the giants were not only physical beings. They were part of the world's music. Their footsteps were percussion in the soil. Their migrations were long melodies across continents. Their presence shaped the rhythm of ecosystems, opening forests, clearing paths, feeding the cycles of growth and decay. When they vanished, the world lost a note. Not necessarily a loud note, but a foundational one. A low tone that held the horizon steady, that kept the plains open, that made the landscape feel wide and breathing. And perhaps the bone song we hear now is the Earth's attempt to remember that note, to keep it from being fully lost. Yet even this remembering is fragile. A gust can break the song, a shift in air can silence it, and the bones themselves will not last forever. Time will crumble them, rain will wear them down, soil will reclaim them slowly, patiently, without emotion. And so the song is temporary too, a brief return, a passing echo. We sit in the presence of this, feeling both wonder and a soft melancholy, because there is tenderness in something that tries to speak after it is gone. Tenderness in a world that holds echoes like relics. The wind slows, the sound fades, and for a moment everything is still, no tone, no chant, only the quiet of night gathering around the bones, settling like dust. The chapter moves toward its closing now, not with resolution, but with deepening hush. We look up. The sky is star-marked, vast, indifferent, beautiful. The moon hangs like a pale coin above the ribs, bathing them in silver. The bones gleam faintly, as if lit from within, not with light, but with meaning. We realize that the song was never meant to be held tightly. It was never meant to be captured and explained. It was meant to be heard and then released, like a breath, like a prayer, like a dream that dissolves as you wake. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was meant to pass through you the way wind passes through ribs, leaving a resonance behind and then moving on. And now, the wind is leaving. It slips away across the plain, gentle and invisible. The ribs stand in silence again, arches of pale memory. The hollow chambers no longer sing. Silence returns as the last song. Not empty silence, a sacred silence. The kind of silence that follows music when everyone knows the final note has been played and no one wants to speak too soon. We remain in that silence for a while, because sometimes the most ancient songs are not the ones we hear. They are the ones we feel after the sound is gone. And as sleep approaches, slow, oceanic, veiled, we let the silence carry us. We let the bones rest. We let the wind wander elsewhere. And in the quiet chamber of the night, we keep only this gentle thought, that the world remembers in echoes. And sometimes, if we listen softly enough, we can hear the past singing through what remains. The wind arrives without intention. It moves gently across a pale stretch of land where grass has thinned and the soil lies open to the sky. It is neither cold nor warm, neither urgent nor still. It simply wanders, as it always has, searching for something to touch, and then it finds the bones. Exposed ribs rise from the earth like the curved arches of a forgotten sanctuary. They are pale, worn smooth by time, marked by the slow work of sun, frost, and dust. The wind slips between them, cautious at first, then curious. A sound emerges, low, hollow, uncertain. It is not a voice, and yet it feels like one. Not a song in the way we know songs, but a resonance, a vibration that trembles briefly in the air before dissolving into silence. It is said that the earth never truly forgets what once moved upon it, and sometimes, when the world is quiet enough, it allows us to hear what remains. In forgotten corners of the earth, there are places where giants fell and were not fully claimed by soil. A ribcage uncovered by wind, a spine revealed by rain, a skull resting open to the stars like a crumbled dome. These are not ruins of stone. They are ruins of life. And yet they do not feel empty. Beneath the silence, something lingers, not as presence, but as echo. We approach slowly, as one approaches a sacred space without walls. The air feels different here, thicker, attentive, as though the land itself is listening back. Dust drifts lazily across the ground, catching moonlight in soft, spiraling paths. The ribs stand in quiet order, their curves forming chambers where air can gather, where sound can rest. And when the wind passes through them again, the tone returns. Deeper now, steadier. It is easy to imagine that these bones are remembering breath. Once, air moved through vast lungs held within these ribs. Each inhale slow and powerful, each exhale warm enough to rise into the cold air like mist. The rhythm of that breathing was part of the world's background, as steady as tides, as reliable as dawn. Now, that breath is gone, but the space it once occupied remains. Some believe that bones are not silent things, that they hold the memory of motion the way a valley holds the memory of water long after a river has shifted its course. They believe that when wind enters those spaces, it awakens what was never fully lost. Whispers tell us that the giants carried songs within them, not songs sung aloud, but songs lived. The song of migration traced across continents, the song of feeding, of clearing paths, of opening forests and grasslands to light. The song of bodies moving together in slow harmony, shaping the land through repetition and patience. These songs were not meant to be heard by human ears. They were meant to be felt, in the trembling of ground, in the widening of plains, in the rhythm of seasons made gentler by enormous presence. And when the giants vanished, the songs did not vanish completely. They sank. They settled into the earth, into bone, into silence. The wind moves again, threading through the ribs like fingers through the strings of an ancient instrument. The sound rises and falls, uneven, imperfect, shaped by fractures and gaps left by time. It feels ceremonial, as if the land itself is performing a ritual of remembrance. We sit with this sound, letting it wash over us without trying to understand it too quickly, because understanding is not required here. Attention is enough. In ancient traditions, sound was believed to shape reality. Chants were used to open gates. Drums were used to call spirits. Flutes were used to speak to the unseen. And perhaps these bones are doing something similar, not calling the giants back, but acknowledging that they were once here. Some believe that early humans who encountered such places did not see bones as mere remains. They saw them as thresholds. A ribcage rising from the ground would have looked like a gate, a place where the living world touched something older, quieter. They might have listened to the wind passing through it and believed they were hearing a message. Not words, but presence, They might have believed the giant was still speaking, not in flesh, but in resonance, and so they would have listened carefully, reverently, afraid to interrupt, because interruption breaks the spell. The chapter deepens here into the question that hums beneath the sound. If bones can sing, even faintly, what else around us is holding echoes we no longer know how to hear? The world is full of buried instruments, caves that amplify whispers, canyons that return voices altered and distant, trees that creak in rhythms shaped by centuries of wind, and bones, especially bones of giants, are among the most ancient of these instruments. They are shaped by life, hollowed by breath, structured to move air. Even after death they retain that structure, and when chance aligns, when wind arrives at the right angle, when silence is deep enough, they answer. The sound grows quieter now, thinner as the wind shifts direction. The tone wavers, becomes intermittent. We feel a soft ache, not sorrow exactly, but recognition. Because the song is fragile, it cannot be held, it cannot be summoned on command. It appears only when conditions allow, and then it fades. Much like the giants themselves, some believe extinction is not an erasure, but a thinning, a slow fading of presence until what remains is suggestion rather than certainty. The giants once shaped the world with every step. Their absence reshaped it again. And what we hear now in these bone songs is not loss alone. It is continuity, the past reaching forward lightly through chance and wind. The wind slows, the sound diminishes. For a moment, there is only the night. Stars hang above the bones, distant and unmoved. The moon casts pale light across the ribs, turning them into silver arcs against shadow. Dust settles again, soft and patient. We realize then that silence is not the absence of song. Silence is what remains after the song has done its work. The final reflection arrives not with words, but with stillness. The wind has moved on. The ribs stand quiet once more, their chambers empty of sound. And yet something has changed. The silence now feels full, as if it carries the memory of resonance, the way a room feels different after music has been played within it. Perhaps that is the purpose of these buried songs, not to be heard constantly, not to be explained, but to remind us briefly that the world once moved to a deeper rhythm. Perhaps it was never meant to be found completely. Perhaps it was meant to surface only in moments of quiet attention, then return to sleep. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And now, as the night grows heavier, as breath slows and thoughts soften, we allow the silence to be the final song. We leave the bones as they are, resting, waiting, holding their echoes beneath layers of dust and time. The wind will return someday, the sound may rise again, but for now, the world exhales. And in that gentle hush, the ancient song settles back into the earth, where memory fades and sleep begins. It begins with a kind of silence that feels too large for the sky. A night without wind, a night without the small noises that usually stitch darkness together. No rustle, no distant call, no soft argument of leaves. Only the stars, bright and indifferent, suspended above a land that seems to be holding its breath. It is said that the world can feel when something leaves it. Not with thought, not with grief, the way we know grief, but with a shift, a subtle loosening, as though a weight has lifted and the ground does not yet know what to do with the space that remains. This is the night after the giants are gone. Not the first night of their fading, not the moment of their final breath. Those moments are hidden, veiled, lost beneath layers of dust and time. This is something quieter, a night when the land realizes slowly that certain footsteps will not return. The horizon stretches wide, wider than it ever seemed before, and yet the widening does not feel like freedom. It feels like absence. In forgotten corners of the earth, there were once paths that belonged to enormous bodies. Paths pressed deep by repeated weight, lined with flattened grass and broken twigs, leading to water and shade and open ground where herds gathered. These routes were not marked on maps. They were written into soil by patience, by tradition, by generations of movement that felt as steady as seasons. Tonight, those paths lie unused. They are still there, faint corridors across the land, but they feel abandoned, like empty hallways in a temple after the last candle has burned out. Beneath the silence, the earth listens to itself, and it hears something missing. We move slowly through this night, as if walking through a chamber of echo. The plains are quiet. The tall grass stands straighter now, no longer bent by massive bodies passing through. The trees along the edge of the forest seem closer together, as if the world is beginning to fold inward. Without the giants, there is less disturbance. The land, once shaped by their steady presence, begins to settle into a new pattern, one that feels more closed, more cautious. But we do not call it better or worse, we simply watch. Because the chapter is not about blame, it is about what happens after. The sky remains the same, the stars do not dim, the moon still climbs its familiar path. And yet, something in the land has changed its posture. It is said that absence can be a presence of its own, a shape you can sense without seeing, a pressure in the air, like the moment after a great bell stops ringing when the silence still vibrates with what was. This night is like that. The world is quieter, but the quiet is not empty. It is filled with the ghost of movement. In some places, the ground still carries impressions, shallow dents where enormous feet once rested, like bowls waiting to be filled. In other places, there are wallows, depressions where bodies once lay down, where warmth once pooled, where breath once rose in slow clouds at dawn. Now those hollows are cold. Rainwater gathers there sometimes, reflecting starlight in still circles. And when the moon is high, those small pools look like eyes, not watching but remembering. Whispers tell us that early people noticed these changes, not in a single day, not in a single year, but slowly, the way one notices a familiar song missing from the background. They saw fewer shadows on the horizon. They heard fewer deep vibrations in the ground. They walked the old trails and found them quiet. In their stories, the giants did not simply vanish. They withdrew. They stepped through a veiled gate at the edge of the world, carrying their weight into another realm. Some believed the giants had offended the sky or broken an ancient rule. Some believed the giants were called away by spirits beneath the earth. And some simply believed the world had turned. But all of them agreed on one thing: the land felt different. Because the giants were not only animals, they were a kind of architecture. They held the horizon wide, simply by walking beneath it. Their migrations kept grasslands open. Their feeding shaped forests into breathing spaces where sunlight could wander. Their bodies carried seeds, stirred soil, redirected water with gentle persistence. They were part of the land's rhythm. And when that rhythm ended, the land began to learn a new one. But new rhythms take time. At first, there is only stillness. The night deepens, and the emptiness becomes clearer. There are no massive silhouettes moving against the far hills, no slow shadows passing between trees, no heavy breath rising from the ground like warm fog. Instead, the air feels sharper, not colder, just thinner, as if something that once filled it is gone. We pause beside a river. The river still runs, soft and patient, speaking in quiet water language as it always has, but the banks look untouched. No great impressions in mud. No broken reeds where enormous bodies drank and waded. The water flows past empty space, as if passing a doorway where no one stands anymore. And we begin to understand the world is not only made of things, it is made of relationships, between bodies and landscapes, between movement and growth, between disturbance and renewal. When a relationship ends, the place where it existed remains, like an empty chair by a fire. Some believe the earth mourns in subtle ways, not with tears, but with overgrowth. Without giants to graze and press the land open, shrubs thicken. Trees move closer together. The open spaces begin to fill. The horizon becomes narrower, not because the sky shrinks, but because the land stops being held wide. And still, no one announces this. No voice declares, "A chapter has closed." It simply happens, quietly, the way dust settles. This is why the emptiness feels sacred, because it is not a dramatic emptiness. It is a patient emptiness, a calm one, a living one. It is the space left behind when something immense has gone and the world is adjusting its breath. We walk along an old trail now, a faint corridor through grass, pressed flatter than the land around it. It leads toward a distant rise, a hill where herds once stood at dusk, looking out over their domain. The trail still knows where it goes, even if no one walks it anymore. And as we follow it, we begin to feel the strangeness of unused paths. Paths are meant to be traveled. They are meant to be affirmed by repetition, by the steady promise of return. When a path goes unused, it begins to fade. Not all at once, but slowly. The grass rises again, the soil loosens, the line blurs, and in that fading there is a quiet symbolism. Even the earth's memory can soften. This is why the chapter lingers on hollow spaces, because hollowness is not nothingness. A hollow is a shape. It suggests what once filled it. The empty trail suggests a herd. The untouched riverbank suggests a giant's thirst. The quiet horizon suggests silhouettes that once balanced sky and earth. In the distance, an owl calls once, then falls silent. The sound feels small in the wide night. And that is part of the wonder too. Without giants, the scale of the world changes. Not because the mountains shrink, not because the sky lowers, but because our sense of proportion shifts. The land feels larger and lonelier. But loneliness here is not tragic. It is simply true, a sacred truth, that all things pass, even the most immense, even the ones that seem too large to vanish. And still, the earth remains, holding their absence the way it once held their weight. The final reflection arrives gently, like a slow tide. We stop walking. We stand in the middle of the plain, under the star-marked sky, and we let the emptiness surround us. It is not a void, it is a chamber, a quiet chamber where echoes once lived. Perhaps the giants are not entirely gone. Perhaps they remain as subtle impressions in soil, as ivory crescents buried beneath moonlit dust, as bones that sing when wind passes through them. Or perhaps they are gone completely, and what we feel is only the shape of memory. Either way, the emptiness remains, neither tragic nor resolved, a still space in the story of the earth. And as sleep approaches, soft and oceanic, we let ourselves rest inside that emptiness. Because emptiness too can be gentle. It can be wide enough to hold wonder. It can be quiet enough to let the mind loosen its grip. Perhaps it was never meant to be answered. Perhaps the earth did not want an explanation. Perhaps it only wanted room to breathe after the giants. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And tonight, in this wide, quiet world, we listen. Not for footsteps, not for answers, but for the sacred hush that remains, when the earth, for the first time in ages, feels empty and learns how to be wide all over again. Small hands move through dust as if through snowfall, not hurried, not careless, but careful, as though the ground itself is sacred and might be hurt by roughness. The child kneels at the edge of a dry wash where wind has peeled back the earth. Moonlight lingers on pale sand, and the night air is cool and still. A faint glimmer, not of metal, not of fire, but of bone, smooth and curved, catches the eye. The child's fingers brush it gently. Dust lifts in a soft spiral, then settles again. And slowly, something immense begins to emerge. It is said that the past does not always come to us through books or ruins. Sometimes it rises from the ground like a quiet dream. Sometimes it waits for the smallest hands to wake it. In forgotten corners of the earth, there was a time when children found the skulls of giants, not in museums, not under glass, but in the open world where bones could be mistaken for stone, where the earth held its relics loosely, and wind could reveal what centuries had hidden. The skull is enormous, a crumbled dome of ancient life. Its hollows are deep and dark, like chambers where silence has moved in and made a home. A tooth, thick and worn, catches moonlight like pale ivory. The curve of the bone feels almost oceanic, shaped by time and pressure, as if the earth itself sculpted it. The child leans closer, breath becomes visible in the cold air, and for a moment the world pauses, because something has happened that cannot be undone. A meeting, not between enemies, not between hunter and prey, but between wonder and mystery, between a small life just beginning and a vast life already finished. Whispers tell us that early people did not always meet the past with certainty. They met it with imagination. They had no words for extinction, no clean explanation for why such immense beings could be here one day and gone the next. They had only what they could feel, what they could sense, what their elders could guess by firelight. And so, when a child brushed dust from a skull, it was not merely a discovery. It was a question placed gently into human hands. Some believe the first response was awe, not fear, not always, because awe is older than fear. Awe is what rises in the chest when something is too large to name. The child might have traced the curve of the skull as if tracing the rim of the moon, might have pressed a palm against bone, feeling its cold permanence, its strange smoothness, its ancient endurance. Might have wondered what kind of being carried this head, what kind of breath once lived inside these chambers. The skull does not answer. It holds its silence the way stone holds heat, quietly, patiently, and yet silence can be powerful, because silence makes space for story. In those early nights, when firelight danced against rocks and shadows, elders may have spoken of the giants with voices lowered, not to frighten, but to honor. They might have said, "It is said, the earth once held beings who walked like hills." They might have whispered, "Whispers tell us." Their footsteps were like thunder that did not rage. They might have pointed to the stars and said the giants followed star-marked paths across the world, guided by lights we still see but no longer understand. And the children listened. Children are born with doors open inside them, doors to wonder, to the unseen, to the sacred possibility that everything has spirit. So when they found a skull, they did not see only bone. They saw a portal, a gate into a world larger than their own. Some believe rituals formed around these discoveries, not grand ceremonies with banners and loud voices, but quiet acts. A circle of stones placed around the skull, as if marking it as a sacred center. A small offering of flowers, dried leaves, a smooth pebble warmed by the hand, a sprinkle of ash from the fire, not to claim, but to acknowledge. Ritual is often born from the need to stand respectfully before what cannot be explained. And these skulls, they were the perfect mystery, massive, undeniable, yet empty of life, a contradiction made visible, because here is where the hum begins, soft and persistent, reverence alongside survival. Early humans lived close to hunger, close to cold, close to the thin line between night and safety. They respected the giants, yes, but they also depended on the world's gifts, and sometimes those gifts came through death. A giant's body could mean warmth for many nights, food for many mouths, tools shaped from bone and ivory, not as trophies, but as continuation. And so the contradiction is not harsh. It is human, to feel awe, and still need to eat, to honor, and still survive. This chapter does not judge that tension. It holds it like a candle flame held between two palms, delicate, real, alive. Some believe the children grew up with these skulls in their memory, like sacred landmarks in the mind. They became part of the inner landscape. A child who once touched the smooth curve of a giant skull might carry that sensation forever. The cold weight, the vastness, the quiet suggestion that the world was once different. Perhaps those children became elders who told stories of giants not as beasts, but as ancient kin. Perhaps they spoke of them as guardians of the horizon, as living mountains who shaped rivers and opened forests. Perhaps the skulls became symbols of cycles, reminders that even the largest beings can pass into silence. In some cultures, bones are seen as the last truth of a creature, the part that returns to earth most slowly, the part that holds shape the longest. To find a skull is to find the outline of a spirit, even if the spirit has moved on. And children, more than anyone, understand outlines. They see meaning in shapes. The skull's hollows become eyes in their imagination, eyes that once looked out over plains and ice. The teeth become moons, lined in a jaw that once sang through breath. The crumbled dome becomes a temple of life. The child might have whispered to it at night, might have asked it questions no adult could answer. Where did you come from? Where did you go? Do you still walk somewhere beyond the veil? The skull remains silent. But silence is not refusal. Silence is invitation. It invites the mind to soften, to drift, to accept mystery without forcing it into a cage. As the chapter deepens, we begin to sense that these skulls were not just objects, they were teachers. They taught early humans that the world is layered, that beneath the visible surface lies another realm, buried histories, crumbled eras, forgotten dominions. They taught that time is not a straight line, but a spiral, that what is gone can still be touched, that the earth is an archive, holding relics in dust and stone, and perhaps most of all, they taught humility. Because to stand beside the skull of a giant is to feel small, not in a humiliating way, but in a sacred way, to feel that life is vast, and our part in it is brief. Night deepens now. We return to the opening scene, but time has moved. The child is no longer alone. Others have come, drawn by the quiet excitement, by the strange pull of bone revealed from earth. They gather around the skull, their shadows long in moonlight. No one speaks loudly. Even the wind seems to pause. An elder kneels, places a hand on the skull as if on a sleeping animal, closes their eyes. It is said that some knowledge is not spoken, only felt. Perhaps they feel gratitude, perhaps they feel sorrow, perhaps they feel only the pure weight of mystery. And then, gently, the time comes to return it, not because it is unwanted, not because the wonder is over, but because some sacred things are not meant to be carried away. Some sacred things belong to the earth, so they cover the skull again, with care. Dust falls softly, like the world tucking itself back into sleep. Stone is placed nearby, a quiet marker. Not a claim, but a remembrance. The skull disappears beneath the surface, the way moons disappear behind clouds, and the night resumes. The final reflection watches this act without resolution, because the story does not conclude. It fades. We are left with an image, small hands brushing dust from enormous bone, then letting it go. A gesture of wonder that does not need possession. Perhaps it was never meant to be found permanently. Perhaps the earth offered it only briefly, like a dream offered before waking. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some mysteries, like giant skulls beneath moonlit dust, remain unanswered, not because they are unsolvable, but because they are sacred enough to be left in silence. As sleep approaches now, we let the skull rest where it belongs, buried, veiled, held by the patient earth, and we keep only the feeling it leaves behind. That wonder can be gentle, that reverence can live beside survival, that the past can touch us softly, and then return to the dark, still, listening ground, the gate that closed without sound. It begins with a gate you cannot see, Not a gate of iron or carved wood, not a gate set into a wall. This gate has no hinges you can touch, no latch you can lift, no inscription to tell you what lies beyond. And yet, it is there, in the hush between one breath and the next, in the thinning of footsteps across a wide plain, in the way a familiar shape stops appearing at the edge of the horizon. It is said that some endings arrive without sound. No trumpet, no final cry, only the soft closing of something invisible, a slow drawing of a veil. Tonight, we walk toward that gate, not with urgency, not with fear. We walk the way one approaches a sacred threshold at candlelight, quietly, respectfully, allowing the darkness to teach us how to move. In forgotten corners of the earth, extinction did not always feel like catastrophe. Sometimes it felt like dusk, a gradual dimming. The world did not announce the final moment when a giant last walked, when a last breath rose into cold air. No one carved that date into stone. No one stood with a bell waiting to mark the instant. The last moments drifted past, unrecognized, and that is the heart of this chapter, the gate that closed without sound. We begin with an image that feels simple, a wide grassland under a star-marked sky. The air is still, the moon is low. A thin line of mist rests near the ground like a sleeping animal. Somewhere in the distance a herd moves, not fast. Slow silhouettes, broad and steady, crossing a gentle rise. Their bodies are dark against the pale sky. Each step presses into the earth with a quiet certainty, as though the land has always been made for them. They pause at a river, they drink, they breathe. Their breath rises, white and soft, then fades into the night. Nothing about this moment feels like an ending. It feels ordinary. And perhaps that is what makes it so sacred, because ordinary moments are the ones we do not hold tightly. They slip through the fingers of attention. We think endings will announce themselves with drama, but the world is rarely dramatic when it changes. It is said that the earth prefers subtlety, so we drift forward, not in years, but in sensations. A winter that runs a little longer than expected, a spring that arrives hesitant, as if unsure of its own warmth, a patch of grass that grows thinner, paler, less nourishing, a path that feels quieter, a watering place where fewer tracks appear. And still life continues. The giants endure. They are built for endurance. Their bodies carry history in their bones. Their fur holds seasons. Their migrations trace ancient spirals across the land. But endurance is not the same as permanence. The gate is still open, but it is beginning to move. Not suddenly, slowly, like a door easing inward on its own weight. Whispers tell us that those who lived close to the land noticed changes before they could explain them. They noticed the silence becoming heavier. They noticed the horizon feeling emptier. But they did not say, "This is the last." Because how could they? Even the giants did not know. They did not wake one morning and feel a label placed upon their days. They only felt the world shifting, a subtle change in the language of wind, in the taste of grass, in the reliability of rivers. They adjusted, they moved, they searched. And in their searching, the gate kept closing. This is not a chapter of blame. We do not sharpen the story into a spear and point it at one cause. We do not say, "It was fire." We do not say, "It was ice." We do not say, "It was hunger," or "It was the human shadow." Those may be threads in the tapestry, yes, but the tapestry is too vast to be held in one hand. So we keep our tone ceremonial, gentle, as if speaking beside a sleeping fire. Because extinction is not always an explosion. Sometimes it is a narrowing, a tightening of options, a slow shrinking of the world's generosity. The gate closes by degrees. A calf is born, and fewer survive the season. A herd passes through a valley once rich with food, and the valley offers less than it used to. A storm arrives at the wrong time. A river freezes earlier. Small pressures stack quietly, like stones placed one by one. No single stone feels decisive, but the pile grows, and the gate keeps moving inward. We drift again, through a series of nights, a moonlit plain where a lone giant walks without the company of many, a quiet ridge where no silhouettes appear at dusk, a valley where old trails begin to fade beneath rising grass. Absence begins to accumulate. It is said that absence has weight, not the weight of a body, but the weight of a missing rhythm. The world still turns, birds still call, rivers still run, the stars still arrange themselves in their distant patterns. But the giants are fewer, and fewer, and fewer. No one marks the moment when fewer becomes almost none. This is how the gate closes without sound. We imagine a final season, though even the word final feels too sharp. Perhaps it is a late winter or an early spring. The air is clear, cold, thin. The sky is washed pale, as if sunlight has grown tired. A lone giant moves across the plain, not weak, not collapsed, just solitary. Its breath rises and vanishes. Its footsteps press into soil and leave deep impressions that will fill with dust by morning. It stops at a familiar place, a water source, a bend in a river, a shallow valley that once held many. It looks out, not with human sorrow, but with the stillness of an animal sensing patterns. Then it moves on. Nothing declares this as the last. No voice announces it, no drum sounds. The gate remains invisible, and yet somewhere in the vast machinery of time, a hinge shifts. The last breath happens, quietly, without an audience. Perhaps it rises into the air and dissolves among countless other breaths, from wolves, from birds, from trees releasing moisture, from the earth itself exhaling, and the world continues. That is the most haunting part. The world continues, because extinction is not a sudden stopping of everything. It is one thread ending while the fabric carries on. The gate closes, but the sky does not fall. And then, sometime later, we do not know when, someone stands in a place that once held giants. They may be a hunter, they may be a child, they may be an elder walking slowly with memory in their eyes. They stand on a ridge at dusk. They look to the horizon, expecting what the horizon always used to hold, but the horizon is empty, wide, still, and the emptiness feels unfamiliar. It is not dramatic emptiness, it is quiet emptiness, the kind that makes you wonder if you missed something, if you arrived too late, without realizing there was a time to arrive. They walk along old trails, faint lines through grass. They find fewer tracks. They visit old resting places, old watering holes. They find silence, and slowly a realization settles like dust. Something has passed through a gate. Something has gone where we cannot follow, and we did not hear it go. This is what it means for a gate to close without sound. It leaves no clear moment to mourn, no sharp edge to point at. It leaves only a lingering question. When did it happen? Was it last year, a generation ago, a decade? The land does not answer. It holds its secrets the way stone holds warmth, slowly, quietly, without confession. Sometimes, long afterward, bones appear, a skull half buried in dust catching moonlight, a ribcage exposed by wind, singing faintly when air passes through, a tusk curving like a crescent beneath shallow soil, relics, echoes. They are like keys without doors, because the gate is already closed, and still we stand before it. The final reflection of this chapter is not an ending, it is a posture. We stand in the quiet, facing the invisible threshold, holding our questions gently in open hands. We do not demand answers. We let the uncertainty be sacred. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was never meant to be marked. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And perhaps extinction is like that. A soft echo fading until silence takes its place. Night deepens. The stars remain. The wind moves lightly through grass, as if turning pages in a book no one can fully read. We stand before the closed gate. We do not know when it shut. We only know that it did, and in that not knowing there is a strange tenderness, because it reminds us that life is not guaranteed by size, by strength, by adaptation, by time. Even giants can slip away quietly. Even the largest stories can end without a final sentence, and so we let the scene fade. We let the invisible gate remain where it is, closed, silent, unseen. We let the land continue, reshaping itself slowly around the absence. And as sleep approaches, as breath becomes softer, we allow ourselves to rest in this sacred uncertainty, standing before a gate that closed without sound, listening to the silence that followed, and letting that silence carry us gently into the dark. The final chapter begins where the day loosens its grip, not in a place you can point to on a map, not in a valley you can find again by daylight, but in the quiet country behind your eyelids, where breath becomes slow and the world grows soft around the edges. A dream opens like a veil, mist spreads across a wide plain, pale and oceanic, drifting low over grass that shimmers as if each blade is made of moonlight. The sky above is star-marked, yet gentle, as though the stars are not sharp points, but distant lanterns dimmed for sleep. There is no hurry here, only the slow unfolding of shapes, vast and quiet, moving through the fog like mountains learning to walk. It is said that some beings never truly leave the earth. They simply change the way they are seen. In forgotten corners of the mind, where memory fades into symbol, the giants still walk. At first you do not know what you are looking at. A shadow gliding across mist, a swelling darkness that seems to rise from the plain itself. Then gradually the shape becomes clearer, a broad back, a curved shoulder, the suggestion of a head bowed in patience. A giant, not roaring, not charging, just moving, slow and steady, as if the act of walking is its oldest prayer. In this dream, you are not a visitor. You are part of the landscape. Your awareness drifts like smoke from a low fire. You float above the grass, above the quiet hollows in the earth, above the places where water gathers in small reflective bowls. And below you, the giants move through the misted plain as though they have always belonged there. Because perhaps they have. Memory is a strange and sacred thing. It does not preserve the past like a museum preserves relics. It reshapes it, it softens it, it carries it forward in symbols and echoes. And so, even when the giants vanished from the waking world, when their footsteps stopped pressing into soil, when their silhouettes stopped holding the horizon, they did not vanish entirely. They sank into story. They became the low hum beneath certain myths, the hidden weight behind ancient carvings, the unnamed presence that lingers in wide landscapes at dusk. Some believe that when a creature is too immense to be forgotten, it finds another way to remain. Not in flesh, in the subconscious, in the dream world where time bends like grass under wind. Here, the giants do not need bones or tusks to prove they existed. Here, they are made of memory itself, that soft, luminous substance that cannot be held but can fill an entire night. Whispers tell us that long ago, people spoke of the giants as if speaking of spirits. Not because they did not know they were animals, but because they sensed that these beings carried something larger than survival. A kind of quiet authority, a sense of belonging so complete that it felt holy. When early humans watched mammoths move across snow-lit plains, they saw more than bodies. They saw endurance. They saw the earth made visible in motion. They saw a rhythm so slow and steady it seemed like a law of nature. And when those beings faded, people did what humans have always done in the face of mystery. They told stories. They painted shapes on cave walls. They carved lines into stone. They shaped ivory into crescents and spirals, as if trying to hold a piece of that vastness. And the children listened, wide-eyed by firelight. The giants became a kind of sacred inheritance, not owned, but carried. In some tales, the giants were guardians of certain places, valleys where bones lay in quiet order, rivers where the earth remembered heavy steps. In others, they were teachers, reminding humans that the world was older and larger than any tribe, any name, any single life. And when those stories were told again and again, they did not remain merely stories. They sank deeper. They entered the dream, because the dream is where old things go when waking cannot hold them. In the misted plain, the giants continue. A herd moves now, not many, but enough to feel like a presence. Their forms are softened by fog, edges blurred, as if the dream refuses to sharpen them into certainty. You can hear them without sound, the low vibration of weight carried gently, the soft exhale of breath that stirs mist into swirling spirals, the faint whisper of grass bending and rising again. It is a music without instruments, a song without voice, a rhythm the body recognizes even when the mind cannot name it. The atmosphere is deeply calm, almost floating. There is no tension here, no chase, no fear, only the slow ceremony of movement. Some believe that this is what the giants have become, not creatures of the past, but symbols of a world that was once more spacious, more open, more patient. A world where the horizon was held wide by enormous silhouettes, and where silence felt full rather than empty. In the waking world, the giants' absence changed landscapes. Forests closed, grasslands tightened, paths faded under new growth. But in the dream world, the giants restore something. They reopen the space. They widen the horizon again. They remind the sleeping mind of what it means for the world to feel held, balanced, slow. As you drift closer in the dream, you notice the details. A tusk curve catching moonlight like a pale crescent. A shaggy coat dusted with frost, shimmering faintly as though woven from starlight. An eye, dark, calm, ancient, reflecting the sky without judgment. The giant does not look at you as prey or threat. It looks through you, as if you are wind, as if you are memory, as if you are simply part of the same great story. And perhaps you are. Because the giants do not belong only to natural history, they belong to inner history, to the deep archive of the human mind that remembers what the earth once carried, even if waking thought cannot. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and in sleep, we listen differently. We listen with the body. We listen with the rhythm of breath. We listen with that quiet part of us that does not need proof, only resonance. In the dream, the giants pass near a river. The water is dark and still, reflecting stars like scattered seeds. Their feet press into the bank, and the mud gives way softly, accepting the weight as if it has been waiting for it. A memory within a memory. Because in the waking world, there are places where the earth still holds impressions, shallow depressions, ancient trails, valleys shaped by passage. The land remembers, and so does the mind. What is a dream, after all, if not the mind's way of becoming landscape, of turning memory into terrain? The giants move on, and the mist closes behind them like a curtain. You feel no urgency to follow. You know somehow that they are not leaving, not truly. They are simply moving into a part of the world that is not lit by waking, a part of the world that is veiled. The language of the chapter becomes softer now, lighter, as if words themselves are beginning to drift. Because the closer we come to sleep, the less we need sentences. We need only images, only feelings, a wide plain, a misted horizon, a slow shadow moving like a prayer. It is said that extinction is a gate that closes without sound, but perhaps memory is another gate, one that remains open, not to bring the giants back into flesh, not to undo what time has done, but to let them remain somewhere, in story, in symbol, in the subconscious chamber where ancient things still move. Some believe that when a being is gone from the earth, it becomes part of the earth in a new way. Its bones become stone, its tusks become buried crescents beneath moonlit dust, its footsteps become faint paths in soil, and its spirit, if we dare to use that word, becomes a kind of echo in the human imagination, a slow rhythm that returns at night, a presence that reappears when the mind becomes quiet enough to receive it. Now, the dream begins to soften further. The mist thickens. The stars blur into gentle points of light, like lanterns seen through closed lashes. The giants are still there, but farther now, their forms dissolving into the fog, not disappearing, drifting, like a song fading into silence, leaving resonance behind. You feel the earth beneath you, even in dream, as though you are lying on an ancient plain under an endless sky. You feel your breath, slow, steady, matching the pace of those immense walkers, and in that matching something settles, a calm recognition that some beings never truly vanish. They simply walk where waking cannot follow. The final reflection does not conclude, it does not solve, it dissolves. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in daylight. Perhaps it was always meant to return only in sleep, where the mind becomes wide enough to hold what the world once held. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and tonight, as you drift deeper, the echo becomes gentle, almost weightless. The mist closes like a veil. The horizon widens, then fades, and somewhere beyond the last waking thought, the giants continue, slow and sacred, walking through the quiet plains of dream, where memory does not end, and the world is wide enough, once again, to hold them.